I am going to talk to you today about the next great frontier for humanity. And that frontier is me, it's you, and it's us. It's people. To frame where I'm coming from, I want to first share with you my life goal. I established this when I was 20 years old. My life goal is to measurably increase the happiness and well-being of the human species. It's a very humble life goal, I think, as life goals go. But initially, I was going to pursue that as a philosophy professor. Life circumstances got in the way, pulled me into business. At this point, I am an entrepreneur, and I've come into this opportunity space, I'll call it, even though I think it's more of a moral imperative, from the standpoint of about a year ago, seeing this happening, distilling the pieces. And I've spent the last year deeply getting engaged in and researching fields like psychology, sociology, economics, getting into neuroscience and endocrinology. And I'll talk about all of those things a little bit more later. So one paradox that I would like all of us to think about today as I'm going through the talk is humans, all of us, are simultaneously two completely opposite things. Each of us are literally the center of the universe. We are the eyes through which everything is seen. We are the brain through which everything is processed. We are the frame and the judgment on everything that is going on. We're the middle and the everything. On the other hand, in the whole scope of existence, from the beginning of time to whatever and whenever the hell the end of time is, we are totally insignificant. We are like sand on the beach of every beach combined in the whole world and under the sea. We're absolutely nothing. And so there's this odd tension in the human condition between being it and everything and at the same time being pretty much nothing. And we, as a species, particularly in the West, for hundreds of years now, have focused on the us as the individual as the most important thing, I would argue to the detriment of the us as the collective. Both the hero and the villain of my story is the fellow behind me. Does anyone know who this is? This is Nicholas Copernicus. It was 468 years ago that he published his heliocentric theory of the world, positing that, for the first time, the sun was the center of the universe, as opposed to the earth being the center of the universe. And that publication is considered the beginning of the scientific revolution. Since then, again, particularly in the West, but it's become very global, science has been the predominant driver and controller of how we live our lives, the choices that we make, and what we are producing as a species, as a collective. So let's talk about some of the impacts that Copernicus in the pre and post-Copernicus world, what those look like. So before Copernicus, we didn't even know that the sun was the center of our universe. We didn't know anything about the cosmos. Today, we've landed people on the moon. We've gone from complete ignorance to complete mastery of space and time. Before Copernicus, if you wanted to travel somewhere, you had to go by foot or by horse. And it would take days or weeks or months to get somewhere that is today relatively short. To go around the world, you could do it, but it would take months and months, and there was a good chance you wouldn't survive the trip. Today, we can travel many kilometers in a very short period of time, and we can get anywhere on the planet safely inside of a day. Absolutely incredible. Before Copernicus, they didn't know how the human body was really fully laid out. They certainly didn't know how it operated, and they certainly didn't know, for the most part, how to cure diseases and maladies and problems. Since then, now we can magically cure a vast majority of things that we experience in our lives to the point where we've mapped the human genome. By mapping the genome, they can take a little swab from our cheek, I've done this, and they can tell us where we probably came from hundreds of thousands of years ago, show the migratory path of our ancestors, as well as tell us, here's a list of things you're more likely to die from, here's a list of things you're less likely to die from. Wow, talk about mastery. Before Copernicus, if you wanted to access knowledge, you needed to have access to a library. And to do that, you had to be either royalty or clergy or wealthy. And even then, you had to go to a cloistered space and take one book at a time and laboriously make your way through gaining knowledge. Today, we sit on the toilet, we lay in bed, we do the most casual of things and hold in our hand access to a majority of the sum total of knowledge accumulated over human history. It's magical and incredible. Before Copernicus, if you wanted your image captured so that it could be presented in your absence and presented for posterity over time, it had to be painted. Someone skillful had to be paid a lot of money to create that artifact. Today, complete democratization. Each of us will probably be photographed certainly hundreds, if not thousands of times in the course of our life. We can capture pictures of everything, everywhere, all the time. It's pretty incredible. But there are certainly some downsides to the gains that we've made. A lot of us like our Apple goodies. I'm guilty of it. But Apple is guilty of very bad practices in terms of how they get the products made. As some of you might be familiar, Apple has a lot of factories in the Far East, in China, and there are numerous examples of bad labor practices. This is an example from a story where over 100 Chinese workers in a factory were poisoned, seriously poisoned, from a chemical called hexane, which is necessary in part of the production process to make our iPads and iPhones. This is sort of the seedy side of some of the things that we enjoy with relative ignorance. The weaponry that we've created. Now, before Copernicus, a cannonball could just injure maybe a dozen people, best case. Now, a single weapon can decimate entire cities, decimate millions of people, just like that. Now, to keep up the lifestyle that we have to burn fossil fuels in all kinds of ways, whether it be factories or cars or planes. Fossil fuels are burning left and right. And the result of that is, as we're all familiar with, at least the theory, whether we believe it or not, of global warming, where we are headed, in terms of our ecosystem, to a seriously dangerous place. We also have landfills dotting the planet and getting more and more and more. And so far, we look at it and say, well, there's plenty of land, it's no big deal, but there's more and more people every year, and more of the land is going away. That's going to catch up to us. And landfills aren't something you can just live on later. Whenever a government makes a decision on a landfill, they are permanently calling that land uninhabitable. And that's necessary for scientific reasons, because of the gases, for a lot of different reasons. And it's just accelerating. How many of you are familiar with the Great Pacific Garbage Patch? Okay, some. So there are multiple garbage patches in all of our oceans that look like this. This is below the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. This is a space in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, more than twice the size of the state of Texas. And y'all, I've heard that Texas is a pretty big place. This whole expanse is littered with plastic crap like you're seeing here, much of it breaking down into little tiny pieces. It's already entering the food chain. It hasn't gotten up to us yet, but it will. It will affect us in that way. And forgetting the effect it will have on us, think to the degree that we have poisoned our oceans, our beautiful oceans, the beaches that we love. This is something that took millions, billions of years to create, and now it's been sullied and soiled in a way that can't easily be fixed, if it can be fixed at all. So science has brought us a lot of wonderful magic, and it's magic that has made our lives as individuals better. Going back to that paradox of the self and the totality. The science has made our lives better, there's no question. But what's the cost? What's the bigger cost? And in this moment, as we consume and consume and consume, what is that going to mean in 50 years or 100 years or 500 years? What will there be? It's a dangerous and concerning question. So what I'd like us all to do now, to make it a little lighter and more positive, is I'd like each of you to take 10 seconds and think to yourself, what was the moment in your life that meant the most to you? So take 10 seconds and just get that into your head. Okay, now I'd like you to share that with at least one of your neighbors. Share with them the moment that for you meant the very most.
Go first.
Actually zoned out for a second.
That's all right.
Okay, so I see a whole lot of smiling out there. I see a lot of happy faces. What I would like now is by a show of hands, how many of your favorite moments that you shared involved people other than just yourself? Certainly north of 90%. Now I'd like to see a show of hands of how many of your favorite moments involved modern high technology. Clearly less than 10%. So the question we need to be asking ourselves is, what is it that we're doing? What is our goal? What is the outcome that we're looking for? Because in my experience, the moments that are most wonderful, the things, the experiences, even if they're not memorable 10, 20 years later, but the things that matter are the times that you're happy. The things that matter are the times that you're paying attention. The things that matter are the times when you're feeling ecstasy. The things that matter are joy and happiness. The things that matter are contemplation and real thought. The things that matter are pleasure and feeling good. The things that matter are concentration, fun. Which brings us back to Copernicus. The world that we have inherited today, the post-Copernican world, is one that I don't think is necessarily a great place. As we think about earlier, the talk about hospice, how once someone enters hospice because they're getting ready to die, suddenly they're given all of the best treatment. Those last days have to be the best thing possible. That was one of the focuses, and you see people laughing and spending time together. Why in the hell are we waiting till we're on our deathbeds to begin the process of engaging our lives in the deepest and most meaningful and beautiful ways? Please. It's utter insanity. It's absolute insanity. We're accepting it because generations before have left it for us, not meaning anything bad, certainly, but we are off in the wrong direction, big time. So now I won't ask you to share this, so don't be apprehensive when I ask you to do this, but I'd like each of you to think about what was the most awful moment in your life? The single most awful moment in your life. So in my research, most people, it has to do with the death of someone they care about. It's someone who has been deceased. But there are some other patterns for those awful moments beyond just death, and they're things that we can increasingly impact if we want to. So there's a category called serious violent acts by the US Surgeon General, and these are predictive. The Surgeon General has a list of things that they can identify in young people and predict who's going to cause these acts or not. They've done research around people who are from 10 to 17 years old. The number one predictor is simply being male, right off the bat. Many of the other top predictors have to do with being male from the standpoint of androgen, which is a testosterone-based hormone which leads to aggression in many cases. So just being male, like right away you're in trouble in terms of the potential of being an aggressive, violent person who would commit crimes. But if you have high testosterone, you're really not cut out for this society, because this kind of behavior is going to get you in big trouble, and it's going to change your life in bad ways, and the degree to which you can control it is kind of unclear. The other predictive factors are things that we probably aren't surprised about: broken families, poor parent-child communication, things having to do with what I call familial social dysfunction. Those are things that also can be studied, can be understood, and can be enhanced. Right now, there are plans by Russia, by Europe, and by the United States to send men to Mars. The estimate is that one of these missions would cost $1 trillion or more. And my question is, why in the fuck are we sending men to Mars while we ignore the ongoing violence and problems and brutality here on Earth? I don't get it. I don't. Sadness is something that we all feel. There was a statistic by another speaker earlier about depression and how depression is going through the roof. Many of us, I'm sure, at one time in our life, whether or not we were clinically depressed, have said, yeah, I'm depressed, I'm not doing that great. Depression, there's physiological things and there's also psychological things. Focusing for the moment just on the psychological side of it, much of depression has to do with the relationship of expectation. What you're expecting to get out of the world, or how you're expecting the world to behave or yourself to behave, versus how it actually does. These are things that can be studied, can be understood, and can be programmed to be reduced, to change the way, the quality of our lives. I'm not just talking about people who are depressed. Like, it's easy to put them in a bucket and shoot meds into them that have been paid millions and billions of dollars for and try and like put the problem away. But it can be tackled in a more total way, and it can be tackled in a more societal way. Like, why do we accept sadness as just being a normal part of the human condition that's gonna happen a lot and that's okay? Let's be less sad. Let's be more happy. Relationships. Many of us spend most of our adult life in relationships of one type or another. And guess what? Most relationships are not good. When people report on their past relationships, a majority of the relationships themselves are bad. The breakups in many cases are very bad and impactful on people, just devastating. When a relationship is good, it's great, but when it's bad, it can really hurt you in a lot of unexpected ways. The breakups are horrible. There's a lot of crap there. So why was I being taught chemistry and physics and all of this science stuff that like people totally need to know, but is completely irrelevant to me? Why wasn't I taught about how to communicate to people better, how to sublimate my ego better, how to consider the expectations of the other person better, how to frame and understand myself better? Why are we putting all of this money into STEM, which I think is nuts? Where's the arts? Where's the humanities? Where's the social sciences? And where are the living skills? These are the things that we need to talk about and focus on. The blind acceptance of STEM and that philosophy of science and enhancing that type of existence is completely unwarranted. We're on the wrong path. It has a place, it has a role in a relationship, but that's it. It's not the total picture as we continue to careen forward. Our work. Each of us during our work years on average will spend almost 24% of the hours of our life working. Almost 24%. That's a huge, huge number. Only 45% of workers in the United States are satisfied with their jobs. Only a small percentage of that are excited about their jobs. What are we doing? We've got all of these people who are spending big percentages of their lives doing these things. They don't like them, they don't want to be there. Many times as a consequence, they're not doing a good job. They're suffering, their companies are suffering, the countries are suffering. It doesn't make sense. Why are we doing it? Why aren't we figuring out ways to have people better understand what they're good at, what they're not good at, how they can better fit or not fit with organizations? How can we work bi-directionally to make organizations, whether they be companies as we understand them now, or some next generation concept of something, to better fit, to align with each other so that the happiness quotient for the individuals goes up and the productivity quotient and success quotient for the company improves, and subsequently, all of us benefit. Finally, now we have the Occupy movement here in the United States, which was preceded by movements really all around the world. We had the Arab Spring, which kind of kicked things off. We had the riots in England for about a week that were pretty bad, and now we've got Occupy that is just going on and on and on. The interesting thing about Occupy is that there's nothing new here. People are saying 99%, 1%. I was watching Wall Street the other night, and damn, if the Michael Douglas character in that movie didn't say 1% of the United States controls 48% of the wealth. I mean, this is not a new issue. Going back hundreds of years, as we look at the entirety of human history, guess what? The 1% controls most of it, and the 99% doesn't. That dynamic, that reality is nothing new. But now we've got people who are pissed off about it and who want it to change in ways that maybe they're struggling a little bit to articulate. Why? Like, why is that happening now? Why aren't we investing in understanding that and talking about what are our social systems, what are our governmental systems, what are the ways in which we organize ourselves as a society, and how can we improve that and up-level that to make all of us better, to change the way that we're acting and living and thinking and learning. We had all of these benefits from science. There's been some wonderful things that have happened. Let's leverage them, let's take advantage of them, and let's make our whole world better. Let's strive for improving the human condition in the most wonderful, meaningful, universal ways that there are. That should be the next frontier for what we're doing. I thank you very much.